Mr Sothinathan, who was an assistant teacher and a sectional head of a high school in the Vanni district and a native of Mullaitivu district. I am now 68 years old and now after retirement living with a family in the area. With my family, after several displacements, I am here at last close to the Mathalan hospital, which has been shifted from Thukudipu government hospital due to intensive shelling and bombardings by the Sri Lankan government force. So here I am with my family members. The whole of the day and most of the night, the family is in the bunker. The same thing around me, the atmosphere and the environment, all the people who were displaced from the district are now being congested in the very enclosure-like in an area where all the people of the district are being congested, and they are merely living the whole day in the bunkers. Now the situation is more intensive and more severe. Every day from the security area which has been declared by Sri Lankan government, such as Thevipuram, Sudantirapuram, Udiyarkattu, Mungilaru, and such other places which has been several times declared and redeclared as security zones, and the refugees, the civilians who vacated their areas relied the government declaration and they went there for their shelter. But due to intensive shelling and bombardings, most of the areas, most of the people who were refugees there and who settled in temporary tarpaulin sheds were killed, massacred, and they were fatally injured in their temporary shelters. Really, this is a pathetic situation and a sad plight which the civilians who were displaced from their areas and who were displaced from their native places were now struggling and suffering and escaping from these shellings and bombardings of the forces of Sri Lanka for their life and for their kids and kin's life for survival. Now the situation is worse, had come from bad to worse, which has driven the people to depression and frustration and even to desperate situation like running and finding shelters for their lives and for their family members' safety. Now the situation, as I have seen, most people who found shelters in the security areas as declared by the government, such as Thevipuram, Udiyarkattu, Viswamadu, and Mungilaru, and such other places, they are being forcibly expelled by shellings and bombardings, and on the way they are being again bombarded and shelled, and the people, those civilians say they are finding no other help, and in desperate situation they flee from the areas to safety areas like other places where there is also intensive shelling. So these people, these refugees who suffer and who run for their survival and who flee for their survival to other places, they don't have no safety shelters even there. Now, as I have seen from this place and the environment and the area here, people injured, people who were succumbed to death, succumbed to injuries, were brought to the temporary hospital at New Marthalan, where I have gone to see the gory scene, which is very horrible. The patients, the injured, fatally injured, and those succumbed to deaths were being laid under trees for their treatments. Even the most injured peoples, those who need very intensive care and those who need very urgent medical treatments are under the trees. They are being treated by handful of doctors who cannot complete the satisfactory treatment even when they work round the clock. Now they are finding that there are no basic medicines, basic treatments, as major injuries cannot be treated without the anesthesia and the essential drugs. No, even they find no basic equipments, no basic instruments here to treat those fatally injured patients. Even the succumbed to injuries and those people who died in the when fleeing from the bombarding and shelling areas, they were being killed and massacred on the way to their finding shelter to another places. Now I can see more intensive displacements from the security areas, and the people those who are displaced are along the roads finding shelters under the trees, and they are unable to bear the horrible weather and the rains and the droughts and the dust of the roads, and their children are suffering from epidemic infested diseases. So those children have no treatments, and those children have no other facilities for a simple life, for a basic survival for their livelihood. Now, as I have seen the places, as the usual routine for the conveyance of essential commodities, for the free ration issue for the people are being closed. The people are starving, and the children, most of the children are undernourished. Even the food, essential food such as dal, flour, rice, and other essential commodities are not being provided for the refugees who live under the trees, shades. And even the sanitation has become from bad to worse because of the expulsion of the volunteer institutes like World Vision and Geneva Red Cross Society and other voluntary service institutions has been expelled from this area by the Sri Lankan government. As a result, sanitation are being very poor, and the people are suffering from epidemic diseases such as cholera, diarrhea. Even the children are more vulnerable to these diseases, and they are suffering. Even elementary and basic treatments are being not provided because of the deficiency of drugs in the hospitals. The government hospitals has been bombarded, shelled, and completely destroyed with the drugs and the equipments and the instruments for treatments. With the improvised instruments and with the very mild drugs which are not fit for treatments are only being provided for those injured and succumb to injuries, deaths, and for those children who were injured, and for those babes who were being infected with diarrhea and other epidemic diseases. Now, starvation is the most prominent problem in these areas, congested areas. The people, not only the grown-up people, but the children and the babies. The babies the parents could not afford to buy milk powders for their babies and for their small children. The adults cannot be provided with nourishing diets. Only dal and rice, which were available in the cooperative shops, now are not available because of the closure of the usual routine for the supply of commodities, for the transport of the commodities. Now that we can see that there is a wanton genocide by the government has been going on, and the minorities are being suppressed and oppressed, it seems, and they don't have any privileges to live in this nation as a peaceful citizens like the majority singular groups. They are being treated and they are being faced with so many frustrating and desperate problems such as killings, massacre and genocide, which is intolerable and which is not being heard and which is not being listened by the international communities, and they are not interested in solving the problem and in finding any solutions for this severe situation and the horrible hunger and the horrible genocide and the horrible sheltering situations which these Tamil civilians of Vanni is suffering. I hope that there should be an immediate solution for this situation, which the international communities and the international institutions should concentrate on Vanni situation and rectify its problems, such as mostly the killings of the innocent minority people, not only the grown-ups, not only the adults, but also the children and the babes are being killed and fatally injured. So that should be first curbed, and that should be first taken into consideration by the international communities, so that this killing should be stopped immediately. Otherwise, these minority Tamils, mostly in Vanni, and those who are refugees in a congested area, which soon be killed and soon be injured fatally and soon be disabled by the Sri Lankan government. On the other hand, the children and babies, those who are suffering from undernourishments, those who are suffering anemic because of the unnourished diets, and those who are suffering without the essential milk food, should find a solution for all this situation. And this is also should be taken and be considered, and should have a concern that should be shown by the international community and by the volunteer forces of the international community. I hope that there should be an immediate solution for all these, for the problem of genocide, for the problem of hunger and for the problems of shelter and for the problems of the undernourished children. An immediate solution should be found, and I hope the assistance for this problem and the assistance for this help and the assistance for this situation, to rectify these situations, the international community should shoulder the responsibility and take charge of the whole this nasty atmospheric problem, and see that the government of Sri Lanka come to a negotiative solution and to find an immediate rectifying peaceful situation. I hope again, and I even beg on behalf of these vanni civilians who have been displaced in their own lands and who are suffering a lot and who horribly tolerate all this and who horribly suffer all these things, should be rectified and seen that it should be soon done by the international community. Again I insist that international community should focus this and see that the government of Sri Lanka should be brought under pressure, and they should insist a pressure on the government to see that all this be rectified and to bring a normalcy and to bring a peaceful life to these suffering citizens who were displaced in their own lands.